Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Late one evening, Ridge Forrester was alone in his office at Forrester Creations, where sketches of haute couture aspirations swirled alongside shadows of family secrets. The holiday lights from the city twinkled through the windows, but his mood was anything but happy. He'd been struggling with a decision for weeks, one that gnawed at his spirit like an incomplete design. Brooke Logan, the woman who had been his destiny, or so everyone claimed, deserved to know the truth. No more waffling or wasted moments. He took out his pen, the same one he used to sign multi-million-dollar contracts, and began writing on hefty, cream-colored stationery imprinted with the Forrester emblem. "My dearest Brooke," he began, his words flowing with a mixture of compassion and finality. "We've experienced a lifetime of passion, heartbreak, and everything in between. Since you catered that party all those years ago, you've been the fire in my life, the one who pushes, inspires, and, yes, sometimes drives me to the brink. Our love has endured scandals, betrayals, marriages that were cut short, and even deaths that turned out not to be. But as I sit here thinking about everything, my father's retirement, the firm moving beneath our feet, the never-ending pull between past and future, I realize that holding on to us is holding us both back." Rich paused and stared at the paper. Memories flooded him, including their first kiss in the lab after developing belief, stolen nights in Big Bear, and vows spoken in exotic locations only to be broken by disclosures. He thought of Taylor and the stability she provided, but this letter was not about selecting her. It was about letting go, about recognizing that their cycle of togetherness and separation had become toxic, harming not only them but everyone around them: Hope, RJ, Steffi, and even Eric. "I love you, Brooke. I always will. That's why we have to say goodbye. A final one. There will be no more retreating when things become difficult. You've given me so much: children, fun, and a legacy at this organization. But we deserve peace. You need someone who does not hesitate and sees you as the sole option, rather than one of many. I've had that hesitancy far too many times. This is my final letter to you, in which I thank you and release you. Live completely, Logan. Feel happy without me." He signed it with a flourish. "Forever yours, Ridge, even as you let go." He sealed the envelope and placed it in her office drawer, where she would discover it the next morning, knowing she was always early to study the new line. Then he departed, his heart aching, but the weight had lifted slightly. The next morning was bright and clear, with the Forrester home bustling with preparations for the family meeting. Brooke came at the workplace first, as usual, her golden hair catching the light as she sipped her coffee. She froze as she opened the drawer to retrieve her favorite pen. The envelope looked back at her, Ridge's exquisite script stating her name. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be a love note or a surprise proposal renewal? They had recently become closer, navigating Eric's forced retirement together and supporting each other through the drama of Katie's new business and residual tensions. She tore it open and sank into her chair to read. Word after word, the warmth fled from her face. Shattered was the only word to describe it. As she neared the finish, tears streamed down her cheeks, the reality of it all striking her like a tsunami. "Goodbye," she muttered into the empty room. How many times had they separated just to reunite? But something felt odd. Permanent. His words were kind, even loving, but they cut the most deeply because they were true. She could feel the distance expanding as he drew away during debates about the firm and family commitments. Brooke crumpled the letter in her fist before smoothing it out again, repeating parts as if to change them. The anguish was intense, destroying the illusion that they were doomed to live forever. She, the perpetual optimist, the woman who struggled for love over all difficulties, felt her world shatter. Sobs emerged, initially quiet, then painful. How could he do this now, as Christmas approaches and Eric struggles? She recalled their recent interactions, the way he hugged her when Eric went out of the CEO office defeated, the exchanged glances over designs. Is it all leading up to this? Eric Forrester prepared for the arrival of the family at his estate across town. He had insisted on hosting, despite Donna's concerns about his mood following the retirement fiasco. Ridge had meant well when he told him to rest after health worries, but it seemed like a betrayal. Eric, the patriarch and founder, was reduced to a figurehead. He put on his festive sweater and forced a smile as visitors arrived, including Steffi and Finn with their children, Hope and Liam, Thorne, and even some extended family members. Ridge appeared last, composed yet pallid. He held his father tight. "Dad, about everything." Eric initially brushed him off, but as the evening progressed, with carols playing and gifts given, Ridge pulled him aside. "I need to tell you something. About Brooke and me." He handed Eric a duplicate of the letter, which he had made for himself as a reminder. Eric read it in his study, away from the noise. His typically expressive face turned blank. Speechless. The guy who had built empires, survived near-death experiences and family battles, stood motionless. "Ridge, will you end it with Brooke?" Finally, Eric had always supported them, urging Ridge to pursue her, convinced that she was his son's real love. Even with Taylor in the picture, Eric had whispered encouragement to Brooke, assuring her that they were meant to be. However, after reading Ridge's words, the maturity, the resolve, Eric felt the ground shift. His son was maturing, preferring tranquility over passion. And Brooke is impoverished. Eric pictured her anguish and how it would spread across the family. The universe they had created, centered on Forrester tragedies but grounded in Ridge and Brooke's epic love, was exploding. Alliances would shift. Logan's versus Forresters again? Hope is devastated for her mother. Is Steffi relieved? Eric returned the letter, unable to speak at first. His eyes misted. "Son, are you sure?" Ridge asked, nodding. "It's time, Dad. For all of us." As the family meeting proceeded, an undercurrent of tension developed. Brooke arrived late, her eyes red-rimmed, her makeup skillfully concealing the puffiness, but not the anguish. She smiled courageously and hugged RJ and Hope, but when she noticed Ridge, she turned away. Whispers began. Donna noticed first and pulled Brooke aside. "What happened?" Brooke asked, showing her the letter. Donna gasped, bringing tears to her eyes. The words spread subtly. Steffi overheard, her face a mix of surprise and secret relief. Hope gently faced Ridge. "How could you?" "Mom is destroyed." The explosion occurred over dinner. Eric, still processing, offered a glass to family togetherness, but his voice cracked. Brooke excused herself and fled to the garden. Ridge followed, but she raised a hand. "Don't. Your letter said it all." And dispute ensued, with voices raised and old wounds revived. Accusations flew, with Brooke alleging he was rushing to Taylor again, and Ridge insisting it was about freedom for both. Eric intervened, no longer mute, appealing for quiet. "This family has survived worse." "But Ridge, Brooke, you're breaking us all." As fireworks of words filled the night, the Forrester-Logan world splintered even more. Katie arrived with Bill, feeling the commotion and her own difficulties with the Logan trademark paling. Secrets were revealed, betrayals from the past were mentioned, and futures were called into question. Eric dropped into a chair, overwhelmed, while Donna consoled him. In the aftermath, Brooke drove home alone, clutching the letter like a dagger. Yes, it is shattered, but it might also be the beginning of mending. Ridge stood on the terrace, watching her leave, regretful yet resolute. Inside, Eric glanced at the family portrait, stunned once more by how rapidly everything might change. The days that followed were a blur of emotional turmoil. Brooke plunged herself into work, revamping lines with strong focus, but her nights were spent crying over old images. Hope rallied around her and promised to help her heal, while RJ wrestled with devotion to both parents. Despite her sympathies, Steffi couldn't help but hope that this meant the company was stable. Ridge confided in Eric frequently, and the two men bonded over the agony of letting go. Eric revealed to having misgivings about pushing retirement, just as Ridge's decision had alienated him from Brooke. "We Forresters think we know best," Eric observed one afternoon, but sometimes we destroy what we love most. Family sessions became tense as Forrester's future was discussed alongside personal appeals. Donna urged Eric to fight for his position, echoing Brooke's internal conflict. Bill offered Brooke a shoulder, old sparks flashing, but she declined. Taylor reached out to Ridge, sensing his fragility, but he refrained. Weeks passed, and a new normal emerged, one that was both painful and illuminating. Brooke emerged stronger, turning her heartache into creativity, a new line inspired by resilience. Ridge concentrated on guiding the next generation and discovering a purpose beyond romance. However, in quiet moments, both questioned whether final truly meant forever. The family world had exploded, scattering parts, but in soap opera style, they would rebuild differently, stronger, or separate. As the new year neared, Eric hosted again, determined to rebuild. Brooke and Ridge exchanged nice words, forming a tenuous truce. Eric toasted options rather than destiny. He was no longer speechless, declaring, "We've survived explosions before. We'll survive this." The letter had devastated Brooke, left Eric reeling, and blasted the family center. But from the ruins, new beginnings emerged, uncertain, raw, but vibrant. The envelope perched on the desk edge, like an accusation. Brooke had already walked past it twice, pretending she hadn't noticed it and that it wasn't addressed in Ridge's distinct handwriting. There was something definite about it that made her chest clench, as if simply touching the page would seal a fate she wasn't ready to accept. The house was too silent, amplifying every worried thought. Finally, she reached out, trembling as her fingertips brushed the envelope's corner and dragged it closer to her. She did not sit down. Sitting felt like surrendering. Instead, she stood in the living room, the late afternoon light shining through the windows and collecting dust motes in the air. The seal cracked with a faint sound that felt far too loud. Brooke pulled out the folded sheets, realizing that Ridge's comments were not intended to console her. The first line alone took the breath out of her lungs. Ridge did not write in rage. That was what shocked her the most. There was no bitterness, no sharp edge to push back against. His statements were quiet, deliberate, and devastatingly clear. He wrote about choices, about how every decision they had made together had led them back to the same terrible crossroads. He wrote of a love that had never completely died, but had been worn down by years of mistrust, disillusionment, and repeating old mistakes they both promised they would never make again. Brooke's hands became tighter around the pages as she read. He didn't blame her. In some respects, it hurt worse than if he had. Ridge accepted responsibility for his own shortcomings, his inability to let go of the past, his incessant pulling away and rushing back, as if love were a revolving door that neither of them could close. He stated that he had come to the dreadful realization that loving Brooke would always entail hurting her, and that staying might be the most selfish decision of all. Tears obscured the ink, and she wiped them away angrily, determined not to miss a single word. Ridge wrote about Eric, his family, and their legacy. He talked of desiring peace, not just for himself, but for everyone caught up in the turmoil of their relationship. He spoke about hope in a cautious, fragile tone, as if writing the word may destroy it. Finally, he wrote the words she dreaded the most. "This is our final goodbye." Brooke's sneeze almost gave out. She collapsed into the sofa, the letter crumpling slightly in her grip as a sob burst forth from her bosom.
"Goodbye."
"Not for now. Not until we figure this out.
Just goodbye."
Final. Absolute. She pressed the letter to her heart, as if doing so would bring Ridge back to her, erase the meaning of what she had just read. Her thoughts raced through every moment they'd shared, every promise, every quarrel, and every reconciliation that had seemed like a miracle at the time. How many times had they stood here before, confident that love would suffice this time? She believed it wholeheartedly. Ridge was now telling her that love, no matter how strong, was insufficient to save them. By the time Eric arrived to Forrester Creations later that day, the impact of Ridge's decision had already begun to spread. He saw it right away. The tight mood, the quiet chats as he walked by, the nervous glances shared between staff members who realized something significant had changed. Eric had lived long enough to see the warning signals of a family in turmoil. Ridge's office door remained closed. That in itself was remarkable. Eric paused, hand hovering near the doorknob, before knocking. There was no response. Frowning, he pulled the door open to discover that the room was empty. The place felt weirdly hollow, as if Ridge's presence lingered, but had already faded. Steffi finally told him. They were standing in the main office, surrounded by sketches and fabric samples that suddenly seemed insignificant in light of what she was about to say. Her speech was stiff and controlled, but her eyes revealed her terror. She talked about the letter and Ridge's determination to break away, not only from Brooke, but from the never-ending cycle that had defined their family for decades. Eric did not speak at first. He simply stared at her, the weight of her words pressing down on his shoulders. Ridge had always been the family's heart in so many ways, passionate, defiant, painfully flawed, and indisputably dedicated. Eric was taken aback when he learned that his son had opted to go away in resignation rather than rage. He wrote her a letter? Eric eventually inquired, as if speaking it aloud would make it less authentic. Steffi nodded. A final one. Eric sat down slowly, his thoughts racing. He had witnessed Ridge and Brooke weather storms that would have driven other marriages apart. He'd seen them injure each other, forgive each other, and claim they'd learned their lesson. Part of him had always assumed they were unavoidable, held together by something indestructible. The concept that Ridge had chosen to end it, truly end it, was nearly impossible to accept. As word spread, the family became divided into silent, isolated pockets of sadness and confusion. Hope attempted to contact Brooke, but was turned down, explaining that Brooke required time, distance, and stillness. Thomas paced his office, fury seething just beyond the surface as he replayed every fight and incident he thought had forced his father to this decision. Was this Brooke? Was that him? Were they all together, a perfect storm of unsolved wounds? Brooke, meanwhile, remained at home, the letter splayed out in front of her like a harsh blueprint of an unwelcome future. She read it several times, hoping to find some buried plea or suggestion that Ridge wanted her to fight for him one final time. But as she read, it became evident that this letter was not an invitation. It was a boundary. Ridge was not asking her to change his mind. He was simply asking her to respect his decision. That understanding destroyed something within her. For the first time in years, Brooke felt completely alone. She was not abandoned in the spectacular, exploding fashion she had become accustomed to, but rather softly, deliberately. She recalled all the times she had accused Ridge of fleeing, of refusing to confront their difficulties. In a brutal twist of irony, he was now confronting them directly by walking away. Eric held an emergency family gathering in Forrester. The room slowly filled, and the tension was palpable. Faces exhibited every possible emotion: anger, anguish, astonishment, and even a glimmer of relief in some eyes that quickly glanced away, ashamed of their feelings. Eric stood at the head of the table, his hands resting heavily on the glossy surface. "This family has survived a lot," he said, his voice firm but loaded with emotion. "But this is different." He spoke about Ridge, the kid he had raised, the one who carried his passion and weaknesses. He stated that he did not entirely understand Ridge's decision yet, but he respected it. That admission alone caused a ripple throughout the room. Respecting it implied accepting it. Accepting it required admitting that the world they had all known, built on Ridge and Brooke's inexhaustible orbit, might actually be changing. Steffi clenched her jaw and fought back tears. She wondered about her father, where he was, and whether he was as hurt as Brooke was. Regardless of what happened, she was concerned for Brooke. Brooke had always been a consistent presence in her life, no matter how convoluted their past was, and the thought of her being broken by this letter made her feel a bitter mix of pity and contempt. Eric concluded the meeting with a simple request for patience. He asked them not to rush to judgment or assign blame. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the bravest thing someone can do is admit they can't keep going the way they have." Later that evening, Eric found himself alone in his office, staring at an old photograph of Ridge and Brooke, younger and smiling, blissfully unaware of how difficult it would be to love each other. He felt a terrible hurt in his breast, anguish not only for what had been lost, but also for the years of struggle that had built up to this point. He had always believed in second chances, third chances, and unlimited opportunities. Now he wondered if Ridge's letter demonstrated that even love had boundaries. Brooke finally allowed Hope to visit her the next day. She appeared smaller, as if the weight of the words she carried had literally reduced her. Hope listened quietly as Brooke spoke, her voice breaking as she tried to express the agony of being dearly loved, yet still left behind. "I don't know how to exist without him," Brooke said, her comments honest and unedited. "He has been in my life for a long time. He was always there for me, even when we weren't together." Hope took her hand and offered comfort without judgment. She did not try to correct it or provide platitudes. She realized, perhaps more than anybody else, that this wasn't just a split. It was the end of an era, the breakdown of something fundamental. Ridge's absence grew more noticeable as the days passed. His office remained idle. His name was never spoken in meetings, as if speaking it might arouse grief they were not prepared to face. Brooke was torn between fury and despair, wanting to shout at him for giving up and thanking him for finally being honest. And Ridge, wherever he was, had his own burden. Writing that letter had not set him free. It had lost him everything familiar. However, beneath the pain, there was a fragile sense of resolve. For the first time, he wasn't rushing toward or away from something in the fire of emotion. He had chosen a choice based on clarity, no matter how unpleasant. The family world had erupted not in flames, but in silence, in a letter, in silent realizations, in the recognition that some love stories finish not because love dies, but because it refuses to stop hurting. And when Brooke carefully folded Ridge's final letter and reinserted it into its envelope, she realized that nothing would ever be the same.